Hi, this is Ofori, the digital reader, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in March. I'm really proud of myself. I've really been always reading is the best way I can put it. There are a couple days I don't read, like if, I'm just busted, I got a part-time job, and I just recently got it, so it's a lot. It's like when you get a job and you haven't worked in a while, it's a lot harder until you kind of get used to it, and then you're like, whatever. So just to keep busy, I got a part-time job, and so the first couple days I worked it. I've been kind of busted, so there are a couple days I haven't read, but for the most part, I've been trying to set a goal of reading 90 minutes a day, and I've been pretty good with that. Definitely my the app I use that keeps most of my analytics bookshelf is letting me know I'm reading about an hour and 6 minutes a day. So I don't chase the analytics, but I like I said, I would like to read about an hour and a half a day. So that's pretty good. I'm getting there. So 4 books is good. I would love to be between 3 to 4 books a month, and that would make me very happy. That's not my goal. My goal is only 2, because like I mentioned, my goal is really just to always be reading something. I do listen to audiobooks, but I don't count audiobooks, and I'll do that in a video, but I don't count them towards my reading goals, because to me, when I make my reading goals, it's about literally reading. So anyway, this month I made it through 4 books, and the first book that I read was Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology. I'd heard some recommendations about it and some good things, and I have to say, it's not a bad book, but it's hard for it to be a bad book because it is very close to being a literal retelling of Norse mythology. It's written in Neil Gaiman's style, but if you're a fan of mythology like me, there's nothing new. And to be honest, there was nothing terribly interesting. It was well written, but the best way I can liken it is that if you love lasagna and somebody makes you a lasagna and they use the basic ingredients of a lasagna and they don't try to get tricky, it's still going to be good, but you're not going to be like, wow, it was the best thing I ever ate. So for me, this was good. Didn't break any new ground. I've read all the Norse mythologies before, and this was those Norse mythologies. I would say if I had known what this book was going to be like, I probably wouldn't have purchased it. So it wasn't bad, and because of that, I'm going to give it 3 stars. But I was a little disappointed that it was so faithful to the classic myths. Next book I read was The Lies of Locke Lamora, and this book came highly recommended by a YouTuber, Murphy Napier, and she was pretty prolific, so when she recommended the book, I was like, my gosh, she didn't recommend the book, she said it was her favorite book. Her favorite book series. So I was like, snap, okay, I got to check this out. And I can see why it was her favorite book series. For me, the more I'm reading, the more I'm getting used to books at different paces and being patient when I'm going through a book with a different pace, because normally I always read fast-paced books. This book didn't really grip me until it started to tell the story of Locke Lamora as an adult. when he was a kid and everything, I was just like, ugh, oh boy, this is going to be. I mean, she mentioned it was Oliver Twisty, and I was just like, ugh, this is going to be a book about a precocious kid, maybe like an Ender's Game kind of thing. Not knocking it, but the pace of it, I was just like, okay, I don't read that much young adult fantasy and fiction anymore. There are a few exceptions, but most of the time I don't, because I just feel like, young adult fiction to me is kind of like the TV WB is basically a little too angsty for me. But this, I really enjoyed the world, and when I got to him as an adult, I just fell in love. I just love. He has like this friend whose skill set is very different from his, and him and his friend really, I just love that relationship between the two of them. I love that whole, if you've watched this channel, I'm a big fan of Doc Savage, and I just love the whole idea of this Doc Savage / A-Team kind of thing where you have a crew and each person in the crew does something, or there's the different, personalities of the members of the crew, and they all have this goal and work together. And I liked his character quite a bit, because sometimes these general and rogues, they can do everything perfectly. And I'm not knocking it. I love books like that. But I kind of like that he had some weaknesses, he had some strengths. So anyway, huge fan of this book. I really toyed with making it a 4 or a 5. I'm going to have to say I'm going to leave it at a 4. I really, really enjoyed the book, but it didn't blow me away. I kind of have a phrase when I'm reading a book, and it like gives me all the stuff I need. It gives me all the vitamins and minerals I need as a growing book nerd. And this book did that. But generally, when I give a book a 5, it's a book that affected me in some way. And this was just good, great enjoyment. And I'm definitely going to read the other books in the series. But it didn't blow me away like Lady Sherlock. Lady Sherlock, the Lady Sherlock series, loved it. And I started out liking it, then loving it. And now I'm reading the 3rd book in the series, and I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to get a 5-star. It's a great book. But for me, my personality. So anyway, Liza Locke Lamora, definitely I'm going to be giving that 4 stars. And more than likely, we'll see with the next book. But a lot of times when I read the first book in the series, a lot of times if I really like it, if I don't give it 5 stars, sometimes it's because the story had to build to create the character, and that created some log jams in the storytelling that maybe took it to a 4. But still, love it. Next book I read was The Winter King. And I'm going to tell you, I love fantasy, but once again, fast-paced action. And this book had the most depth of a fantasy type book or science fiction type book I've read since Dune. Dune was the weightiest book as far as what was going on and everything that I had read, and generally I didn't dive into anything that weighty again. I would generally say the first 1/5 of the book, I was just like, oh God, this is so slow paced. Oh, they're not doing nothing but just talking and whining, and oh my gosh, it's all about everybody's feelings, and it's all about, how people are feeling and what they're thinking. And I was just like, oh God, help me through this. So the first 100 pages, I just wasn't feeling it. I knew I was going to keep reading it, but I just wasn't feeling it. And then, I don't know what happened, but it just clicked, and I started to care about what people were thinking and feeling. And the narrator of the story, I started to really just enjoy the way he told the story and the way his life was progressing. I mean, The Winter King to me is kind of like a primer for somebody who wants to get a feeling of what it was like in the Dark Ages. It is just it's an incredible book. Once I started caring and once I got deeper into the story, I was just sucked in. And this book, it reached a point where I was reading this book and I was just loving it. And it was just kind of a sad book. It made me feel sad because their portrayal of the Dark Ages was a tough, tough time. It was like a time where nobody really had it good. People had it better than others, and I guess that's the close to good. But it was just a rough time. And then the way they're doing the King Arthur vibe, obviously I read a lot of mythology, so I kind of know how everything plays out. And it also kind of had like this sad thing of you're reading about this rise of this person and you know how things are going to turn out. And you're reading their sadness and their optimism and their fears. And you're just like, something I completely didn't feel when I was reading Neil Gaiman's book about Norse mythology. You know Ragnarok's coming, but I never felt like sad for them that I knew what was going to happen at the end and their struggles in life, and I kind of knew how it was going to turn out. This was an amazing book for me. I really, it's amazing to me in two ways. It was amazing to me. I was kind of proud I got through it. It's a big, weighty, slower paced book. And like I said, about a fifth of the way through, it just gripped me and I really started to enjoy it. It is the kind of book, for example, Lady Sherlock is a book I'm going to read one every month. It just is, it is candy to me. I just love that book. I can read it and it just energizes me and I chuckle and everything. This is a book where every time I read one, I'm probably going to have to take a break because they're kind of sad. They're kind of rough. The Dark Ages just was a rough period. So this book was amazing. And their take on Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table was amazing. And so I'm giving this book, when I first read this book, I had no idea I would be doing this, but I'm giving this book 5 stars. And the last book I read this month was Nobody Gets the Girl. It's a book I had bought years ago. I just never read, and I thought it would be a quick read, and I was wrong. I thought this was going to be just a superhero novel, and it has superheroes, kinda. It has, some of the characters have superpowers, but this really was a story much more about what is evil, what are good intentions, and how people with power can get lost in using that power, thinking that they're doing good. And it was a good book, a very good book. But it definitely was not what I was thinking it was going to be. It was not a fast-paced superheroes fighting villains kind of read. This book had more the feel of like a graphic novel Watchmen kind of thing, where it was dark, it was gritty, stuff happened, and I was like, man, I would say this is the kind of book, as I say it all the time, but I live next to a train, so if you hear the train, that's just the way it is. This is the kind of book I would absolutely recommend to somebody who doesn't usually read superhero books, because it's closer to science fiction than superhero stuff. And the reason I would recommend it is because the ideas behind it are weighty, they're interesting. This is much more Kurt Vonnegut-y than Superhero Witch, which is, it's so much about the people, so much about the personalities, so much about the whole life is crazy, you never know what's going to happen, and you never know how the suckiness and the weirdness of life will actually end up in the end. You know, that kind of thing. But this book, I once again toyed with 3 or 4 stars. I would say for my personal enjoyment, it probably was a 3-star book. But if I had to pick a superhero book to recommend to somebody who was skeptical about superhero fiction because they didn't think it was that deep, this would be one of the ones I would do it to. So for me personally, I'm going to give it 3 stars because I don't know. I don't do half stars. Can I give this 4 stars? No. Yes, I'm going to give this 4 stars. The main reason I'm going to give this 4 stars is I shouldn't think of this as a superhero book, although it has superheroes in it. It doesn't have a lot of the hallmarks, like I mentioned, of my typical superhero fiction. But the story, it is a lot deeper than superhero stuff. No, I'm going to go to 3. I'm going to keep it at 3. I did buy there's 4 books in the series, and so I didn't buy, but the other 3 books are in my queue. So I am going to read the other books in the series, but the other books in the series, honestly, I'm not sure where they're going to go. This book looked like it was just going to be a light superhero romp with some romance. No. The other books, one is with villains, and so I'll see where those books go once I do pick them up. So anyway, those are the 4 books I read in March. This was a month where I definitely thought I was picking books that were going to easily be within my wheelhouse, that were going to be books similar to books I read all the time, and really only 2 of them, Locke, Lamora, and Neil Gaiman, Norse Mythology. Those 2 were books that I've read all the time. Those were books I could totally get into. Those were in my wheelhouse. Like I said, Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology was so in my wheelhouse that it was okay. So that's it. This is the Digital Reader, and keep reading, y'all.